After refusing to help pay for my college, my parents now expect me to loan them money for my sister's extravagant wedding, but I'm not letting it slide this time. I'm Ethan, 24 years old, and I'll admit that I've been the family's black sheep for as long as I can remember. Growing up, I always felt like the odd one out, especially when it came to finances. My parents were never shy about making it clear that they prioritized my sister, Sophie, over me, especially when it came to money. So, when they flat out refused to help me with my college tuition, I took the hit, worked my butt off to pay for myself, and never complained. That is, until they came to me last week, asking me for a loan to pay for Sophie's wedding. An extravagant one at that. A wedding they'd been planning for months. I couldn't believe it. I wasn't about to be their backup plan anymore. This time I was going to say no, and it felt damn good. Growing up in my family, it was always Sophie this, Sophie that. My parents didn't even try to hide it. They made it clear that she was their golden child, the one who could do no wrong. I was never part of that picture. I remember being younger and wondering why I was constantly overlooked. Sophie could be late for dinner, ignore their rules, and yet still be praised for her independent spirit. Meanwhile, I was the one who had to work twice as hard just to get noticed. No matter how much I tried to please them, I just wasn't their priority. I wasn't the perfect student, and I wasn't the perfect child, so I learned early on that no matter how hard I worked, I'd never be Sophie. It wasn't like I didn't try to be everything they wanted me to be. I put in the effort, but no matter how many times I exceeded expectations, it was never enough to make them proud. When I was accepted to college, I was thrilled. It was my chance to break free from their shadow, to prove to myself that I could do it on my own. I worked my tail off throughout high school, balancing a part-time job, maintaining a solid GPA, and trying to prove that I had the ambition to make something of myself. When I shared the news with my parents, expecting some sort of praise or acknowledgement, their reaction was disappointing to say the least. They didn't congratulate me or tell me how proud they were. Instead, they handed me a bill and told me it was up to me to figure out how to pay for it. No, they didn't offer me a single dime. The money they had saved over the years, all the things they could have given me to ensure I had a smoother ride through college, were all being saved for Sophie. She was still in high school, and already they had plans for her future, plans that didn't include me. I felt so rejected, so abandoned, but I tried to swallow my pride and make the best of it. I had no choice. If I wanted to go to college, it would be on my terms, even if that meant putting myself in serious debt. I worked multiple jobs, took out student loans, and did everything I could to make ends meet. It wasn't easy. Every day, I fought with the overwhelming weight of exhaustion, both physical and emotional. But I never complained. I just kept going, kept pushing forward because in the end, it was my dream. Sophie, of course, didn't have to worry about money. Everything was handed to her on a silver platter. She didn't understand the struggle I was going through, nor did she seem to care. It wasn't that I was jealous of her. No, I just couldn't understand why my parents thought it was okay to prioritize her every step of the way. And as the years went by, the gap between us grew wider. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about the emotional distance, too. The distance they had created by constantly choosing her. Then came the news of Sophie's engagement. To be honest, I wasn't shocked. She'd been dating this guy, Mark, for about a year, and I'd already heard rumors that their relationship was moving fast. But the way my parents reacted was another story. They were ecstatic, of course. My mom started planning the wedding as soon as Sophie said yes, and my dad was on board with whatever she wanted. They were already discussing extravagant venues, caterers, and fancy invitations. It seemed like nothing was too much when it came to Sophie. The wedding quickly turned into an affair worthy of royalty. Thousands of dollars, all for a couple who had barely been together a year. I was happy for her, but there was a pit in my stomach. This wasn't a simple, family-oriented wedding. It was a show, a spectacle, and that's when my parents came to me. They asked for my help, and not in the way I had expected. They didn't ask for my opinion on the guest list or for my thoughts on the decorations. No, they asked for money. They needed me to loan them money to pay for Sophie's wedding. Money I didn't have to spare. I had just started building my savings, trying to get on my feet after graduation, and now they were asking me to give up everything I had worked so hard for so they could give Sophie the wedding of her dreams. I wanted to scream. I wanted to call them out on their hypocrisy. How could they have never once thought to help me when I needed it most? Yet they were now demanding that I fund something so frivolous. I wasn't a backup bank for their extravagant tastes, and I wasn't about to be the one to bail them out now. Not this time. I was done. I had spent years sacrificing for them, trying to prove I was worthy of their love and support, but I wasn't about to let them treat me like a safety net anymore. I knew it wasn't going to be easy to say no, especially with how much pressure they were putting on me. But I had learned over the years to stand my ground, and I wasn't going to let them manipulate me into giving up my hard-earned money for something that wasn't even my responsibility. This was the line in the sand. The moment when I finally stopped being the family's afterthought. I was still grappling with the overwhelming sense of frustration and disbelief when the phone call came. It was my mom, and she sounded like her usual upbeat self, but I could hear something else in her tone, a slight unease, maybe even guilt. She wasted no time getting to the point. "We need to talk about Sophie's wedding," she said, her voice laced with a forced cheerfulness. I felt the knot in my stomach tighten. Every fiber of my being told me that this wasn't going to be a simple conversation about wedding arrangements. I braced myself. "I'm not going to give you any money for the wedding, Mom," I said, my tone firm but measured. "I've been through too much to get where I am, and I'm not going to fund something I don't even agree with." There was silence on the other end of the line. I could practically hear the gears turning in her head, trying to figure out how to spin this situation in her favor. After a long pause, she finally spoke, her voice much quieter now. "I understand, sweetie, but it's not just for Sophie. Your dad and we're struggling financially. We've taken out loans, and we still need help covering the final cost for the wedding. It's a lot, and we're doing everything we can, but we really need you." My mind started racing. They were asking me to bail them out for something they could have easily avoided. My dad was still working, my mom had plenty of financial resources, and yet here they were, trying to pull me into their mess. The audacity to ask me for help after everything they had done, everything they had ignored, felt like an insult. "I'm sorry, but I can't help you," I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "I've been through enough to know my limits, and this is one of them. I'm not your fallback plan anymore. I've got my own life to live." The conversation ended quickly after that. I could feel the weight of my decision sitting heavily on my shoulders. Part of me wanted to cave. The guilt was real. But another part of me, one that had grown stronger over the years, knew that this was something I had to do. I had to stop letting them manipulate me, stop letting them walk all over me just because they were family. But that wasn't the end of it. The next few days were filled with passive-aggressive comments from both my mom and dad. They tried to guilt-trip me in subtle ways, reminding me how much they had sacrificed for me, how much they had done for my education. It was clear that they were trying to paint me as the bad guy, but I wasn't falling for it anymore. And then there was Sophie. She called me one evening, sounding as sweet as ever, but there was something in her voice that didn't sit right with me. "Hey, I know things have been tense lately with Mom and Dad," she began, her voice dripping with feigned concern. "But I really need your help. You know how important this wedding is to me." Brace myself. Here it was. The pressure I had been expecting. I wasn't going to give in this time, no matter how much she played the victim. "I'm not giving you money for your wedding, Sophie," I said, my tone unwavering. "You've had everything handed to you on a silver platter your entire life. You want this wedding? You figure it out." I could hear her gasp on the other end of the line, her breath hitching as if I had just slapped her. "What's wrong with you? You're my sister. You should want to help me." I took a deep breath, refusing to let the guilt creep in. "I've helped you my whole life, Sophie. I'm done being your backup." The line went silent for a moment. Then she huffed, her voice suddenly cold. "Fine, whatever. I thought you'd have more compassion, but I guess I was wrong." The conversation ended shortly after that, but I knew things were going to be different from that point on. I had taken a stand, and now they were going to make me pay for it. They would twist the narrative however they could, and they would try to make me feel guilty. But I had finally learned to stop caring about their approval. What I didn't expect, though, was what happened next. A few days later, I received a message from an unfamiliar number. I hesitated before opening it, unsure of what I was about to read. But when I did, my heart dropped. It was a photo. The image was blurry, taken from a distance, but I could still make out the figures. Sophie and Mark, standing side by side, both smiling with excitement. But the message that accompanied the image made my blood run cold. You know what they've been hiding? Maybe it's time to finally confront them. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. What was this photo? Why had I been sent this? And more importantly, who had sent it to me? The sender didn't identify themselves, but their message was clear. There was something I didn't know about Sophie, something that had been kept hidden. The question now was, what exactly was going on? And how deep did the deception really run? The days after receiving that cryptic message felt like a blur. I couldn't shake the image from my mind. The blurry photo of Sophie and Mark, standing side by side with smiles plastered across their faces. The words that came with it echoed in my head, refusing to let me rest. You know what they've been hiding? Maybe it's time to finally confront them. Who sent it? And what did it mean? I tried to push the thought aside, to focus on my own life and the decision I had made to stop enabling my family. But that photo stayed with me, eating away at the edges of my mind. I knew there had to be more to it. There had to be something bigger that I wasn't seeing yet. There was no way Sophie would let me off that easily, not without a fight. Then, out of nowhere, I received a phone call from Mark. I didn't recognize the number, but it wasn't hard to guess who it was. Sophie's fiancé, the man who had been at the center of all the drama surrounding their wedding. I stared at the screen for a moment, unsure of what to do. He'd never called me before. Something in my gut told me this wasn't going to be a casual chat. But I answered anyway. "Hello. Hey, it's Mark." His voice came through the line, hesitant but somehow insistent. "I know you're probably upset about everything going on with the wedding and what's been happening, but we really need to talk." "Talk about what?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral, though inside, my mind was racing. About Sophie, he said, the words heavy with a strange urgency. There's something you don't know, something you need to hear from me. I swallowed hard, my heart skipping a beat. What are you talking about? He sighed, the sound almost a mix of frustration and guilt. Sophie has been hiding something from you. And from everyone. I don't know how to say this, but she's been, well, let's just say she's not the person you think she is. I could feel my breath hitch in my chest. What do you mean? What's she hiding? There's more going on than you think, Mark continued, his voice lowering, as if he were speaking carefully, weighing each word. Sophie hasn't exactly been faithful to me. There's someone else she's been seeing. I didn't want to believe it at first, but I've seen the evidence. And I'm not the only one who knows. The phone felt like a weight in my hand, each word hitting me harder than the last. I was in shock. It wasn't possible. This wasn't Sophie, the woman I had grown up with, the one who had always been the center of attention, the one who could do no wrong. But Mark's voice was steady, like he had no reason to lie. So, you're telling me that Sophie is cheating on you? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, the disbelief thick in my throat. Yes, Mark said, his voice almost resigned. And I don't want to be the one to bring this all out, but you need to know. She's been seeing someone else for months. I think it's time you hear it from me, because I'm sure you've already figured out that things are not as they seem. I didn't know what to think. How could this be happening? How could Sophie, my own sister, be capable of this kind of betrayal? My heart was pounding in my chest as I tried to piece it all together. And then it hit me. This was exactly the kind of thing I'd been warned about. The kind of deception that had been hiding beneath the surface, waiting to explode. The worst part? I had no idea how deep this ran. Was it just Sophie's secret? Or was there more to it? Something bigger that I wasn't seeing? There was only one way to find out. I needed to confront Sophie. I had to hear it from her directly. This could all be some kind of misunderstanding, or maybe Mark was exaggerating. But something told me I wasn't going to like what I found. The next day, I showed up unannounced at Sophie's place. I knew she'd be home. It was the weekend, and she had nothing planned. I stood at the door for a long moment, trying to gather the courage to knock. The lump in my throat felt like a boulder, and my palms were sweaty with anticipation. But I had to do this. I needed the truth. When she answered the door, she looked surprised to see me. Her eyes immediately darted to the ground, and I knew she was hiding something. I could feel it in my bones. What are you doing here? She asked, her voice a little too high-pitched to be casual. We need to talk, I said, my tone more forceful than I had intended. About Mark, about your wedding, and about what's been going on behind my back. Her eyes flickered, and I saw the guilt flash across her face for a brief second before she quickly masked it with a smile. What do you mean? Everything's fine. What's going on? Cut the crap, Sophie. I know about the affair. I snapped, not giving her a chance to deflect. Mark told me everything. Her expression faltered. The color drained from her face, and for the first time in a long while, I saw her as just a human being, vulnerable, exposed. She opened her mouth to say something, but the words didn't come out. She took a deep breath, her shoulders sagging as if she had just been caught in a lie so big, she couldn't hide from it anymore. I'm sorry, okay? She whispered, her voice shaky. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know how to face you or Mom and Dad. I felt the sting of betrayal burn in my chest. You should have thought about that before you started playing with people's lives, Sophie. You've hurt Mark. You've hurt me. And now, everything is coming apart because of you. I never meant for this to happen, she pleaded, her voice cracking. I thought I could fix it. I thought I could keep it all a secret, but now everything's falling apart, and I don't know what to do. It was the first time I'd ever seen her so broken, and part of me wanted to forgive her, to wrap her in my arms and tell her everything would be okay. But the truth was, I couldn't let this go. Not after everything that had happened. Maybe it's too late for that, I said, my voice hard. You crossed a line, and now you're going to have to deal with the consequences. The fallout from that conversation with Sophie was inevitable. For weeks, we barely spoke. I couldn't look at her the same way, and she knew it. The guilt was all over her face every time we crossed paths. But the hardest part was watching the rest of the family slowly become involved in the mess she had created. As much as I wanted to distance myself from the situation, it felt like the world around me was pulling me back in. Every time I saw her mother, she was trying to smooth things over, but I couldn't pretend. I had to deal with the weight of what Sophie had done, and now, the whole family was implicated in it. Sophie's engagement to Mark ended almost immediately after I confronted her. It was a painful breakup for both of them, especially for Mark. I knew he had been deeply in love with her, and watching him lose everything was one of the hardest things I'd seen. He was hurt, understandably so, and I couldn't blame him for needing space. We didn't talk for a while after the breakup. I tried to give him the room he needed, though I was struggling with my own emotions too. I still felt angry at her for everything, but now I was starting to feel a pang of sympathy for Mark. I wanted to reach out, apologize, and let him know I wasn't complicit in her lies, but he had his guard up. He was hurt, and I understood that more than I wished to. Sophie, on the other hand, seemed completely lost after the breakup. The breakup had knocked the wind out of her sails. She wasn't the same person I had known before. It was almost like she had lost her sense of identity. But instead of using this moment to reflect on her actions, she spiraled even further. Her attempts to regain control of the situation only made things worse. At times, she seemed like the same manipulative person, trying to charm her way back into everyone's good graces, but other times I saw the cracks in the facade. It was clear she was struggling. I had made it clear to Sophie that I wasn't going to just forgive her immediately. I wasn't interested in playing the game of everything's fine for the sake of family unity. The old me would have let things slide, ignored the pain, and told myself I was being understanding. But this time I couldn't. I knew it wasn't just about the affair anymore. This was about betrayal at a much deeper level. This was about years of manipulation, and I was finally done turning a blind eye. For weeks, I kept my distance. The tension in the family was thick, and I felt like I was stuck in the middle of something I didn't want to be a part of anymore. My parents and my extended family, including Sophie's, all wanted to sweep everything under the rug. My mom kept telling me that Sophie was just going through a tough time and that I should be more understanding. But I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. The relationship I had with Sophie had been broken far before the affair, and now I needed to protect myself. It took me a long time to finally say no to the constant pressure of just getting along for the sake of peace. I wasn't going to enable Sophie's behavior any longer. I stopped answering her calls. I didn't attend the family dinners where I knew she would be present. I spent most of my time focusing on myself, on my own healing. And then, as if it was fate, Sophie reached out. It was weeks after everything had come alight. She showed up on my doorstep one afternoon, her face drawn with exhaustion and guilt. I could see the hurt in her eyes, the regret she hadn't voiced in so many weeks. It was the first time I'd seen her like this, vulnerable, raw. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice quiet, cracking under the weight of what she was saying. "For everything. I know I can't undo what I've done, but I need you to know I regret it. I regret everything." For the first time, I believed her. There was no manipulation, no excuses. It was just a sister standing before me, owning up to her mistakes, understanding the hurt she had caused. I wasn't sure how to react. I had long since stopped expecting an apology from her. "I'm not going to pretend that it's easy," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. "You've hurt a lot of people, Sophie, and I'm not sure if I can ever forget that. But I'll tell you this, I'm not going to carry your burden anymore. You need to deal with the consequences, but I'm here if you want to rebuild things with time." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I understand. I'll do whatever it takes." We stood there in silence for a long moment. It wasn't the warm, familiar silence we had shared in the past. It was a heavy silence, full of unspoken words and broken pieces. But it was also the beginning of something new. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a willingness to try. A willingness to rebuild. Not immediately, not perfectly, but eventually. Sophie eventually sought therapy. She began to work through the issues that led to her manipulative behavior. It was a slow process, and the journey was not without setbacks. There were moments when I wasn't sure if I could continue trying, but I had made the decision to set boundaries and stick to them. The hard truth was that the person I had once known no longer existed, but maybe, just maybe, there was room for a new version of her in my life. And then there was Mark. I had reached out to him. It wasn't easy. He had every right to be angry with both Sophie and me, but I knew that the healing needed to come from both sides. We talked for hours, sharing our perspectives, our frustrations, and our hopes. It was clear that we had both been victims of Sophie's lies, but we had to move forward separately. For Mark, that meant finding closure. For me, it meant accepting that not all wounds heal the same way, but they can heal. It wasn't a perfect ending. It wasn't the reconciliation I had once hoped for. But in the end, it was something better. It was real, and real is enough for me. Do not forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, press the bell icon, and share your thoughts in the comments.